Hey guys, just want to start this video by clarifying a couple of things just quickly. The first one is, obviously, if the Japanese government and the Japanese people were to decide that they don't want anything to change in Japan ever, then obviously that would be their decision to make, wouldn't it? Perfectly reasonable for them to decide the future of their own country. Having said that, the reason we're making this video isn't an idea of our own. What this is that the Japanese government and the Japanese media have been talking a lot about the future of Japan and the future of the Japanese economy and a whole heap of things like that. And we have had a number of emails from people or mails from people asking us for comment or feedback or a video on the topic. So that's why we're making it. And first of all, where to start? First of all, this is just observations based on what we can see in other countries and what we can see happening in Japan. Probably one of the most major things that's happening in Japan, as lots of you guys already know, is that the population is either in zero growth or in negative growth, depending on which reports you read. But either way, what's happening is there's a lot of the population is becoming older and retiring and stopping work, and a lot of the younger people aren't having kids. So basically it means that the workforce, unless something changes drastically over the next 10, 20 years, the workforce is going to shrink. And yet we will still have virtually the same population to support. So basically what that means is that less people are going to have to get more work done. Or at the very minimum, less people are going to have to get the same amount of work done that's getting done now, which means they're going to need higher productivity. So the government talks about this and the media talk about this, but what we see is a lot of talking and a lot of sort of different opinions on it, and lots of talking and more talking and more talking and more opinions, and nothing really comes of it. Nothing really comes of it because there's an incredible inertia in Japan against change. So what seems to us as being the solution will be something like when they first brought ecological thinking or environmentally friendly thinking into Japan, they gave it a name. They called it ECO. So if you write it in Romanji, it's ECO, ECO, and it's short for ecologically friendly, right? Although most Japanese people you speak to don't know that, but it is actually ECO. It's actually short for ecologically friendly. So they brought in what they called ECO, and then once it's got a label like that, it's got a name like that, then it's sort of it's what's also called in Japan a concepto. So the eco no concepto wa, and then they talk about the concept of eco. And then what it means is that whenever they get something that they're trying to get across to the people, and they're trying to make the point that it's green or it's environmentally friendly, they just say it's eco. So they do it with cars. You know, this car is eco. This refrigerator is eco. This way of recycling your rubbish is eco. And it's worked. It's really got into the Japanese psyche now, where things that are eco or not eco. You know, and things that are eco are good and things that are not eco are bad. So it worked. It got the concept of environmentally sound decision making into the Japanese psyche, and it worked really well. And it's been done in commercial things as well, in other things as well. So for example, they had the concept of cool biz. Cool biz, and cool biz is from the Japanese fashion industry, where they have suits. So the classic suit that all Japanese business people wear, all they look the same, the black standard suit, but they're making it out of a different material that in summer is cooler. So they call it cool biz. So you buy this suit is cool biz. And the concept of cool biz is sort of right through Japanese society now. And then they brought out warm biz. And warm biz is basically look at it, it looks like exactly the same suit, but it's made out of a different material that you can wear in winter and is quite warm. So they call that warm biz. So our point is, we think what's going to be required is that, of course, in Japan, change can only come from the top down, because of the way the society works, nothing ever changes from the bottom up. So it's always from the top down, which means that what's going to happen, what's required is that from the top, from the Prime Minister and the government, are going to need to come up with a strategy and call it something like smart biz. And then really promote it and really get it across that smart biz is what is required for Japan to do well, and it's required for Japan to survive, because what's obvious from the inside looking out, and possibly from some people from the outside looking in, but what's really obvious is that it's going to be really difficult for Japan to compete from this time onwards. Internally, we've got that problem of people getting older, which means that there's going to be less of us working, and lots of other people that have stopped work and retired. We're still going to get all the same amount of work done, and yet you've got a work environment here where it's quite common for people to work 40, 50, 60 hours a week, but in actual fact only really do 20 hours a week of productive work. And this comes from, you know, live in Japan a while and talk to enough Japanese people and find out what they spend their week doing, and there's just so much stuff is just wasted. So much time is just wasted. You know, there's so many, you know, the classic business meeting here is the boss sits there and talks for 2 hours, you know, and then the other boss sits there, well, one boss will talk for an hour and the other boss will talk for an hour, and everybody sits there and listens and nods and pays attention and tries to stay awake. And they'll tell you, you know, they're almost falling asleep because they're not being given any sort of useful information. So in the concept of smart biz, what they're going to have to get across is that when you're doing something for work or for business or even in bureaucracy, any sort of work at all, that there needs to be productivity. And I mean, this seems really obvious to a lot of people coming from other business environments from other countries. That usually we're measured by productivity, and individually we're measured based on productivity, and as a group and as a division and a department we're measured by productivity, and as a company we're measured based on productivity. Whereas in Japan, it's rarely the case. It's rarely the case. There are some exceptions, such as Toyota and companies like that, where they are aware of these things, and that's how they've managed to stay competitive on the world market. But usually when you talk to people here about what they do at work, there's the productivity thing's just not, you know, a lot of people here will spend the last 2 days of the month, every month, writing a report about what they did during the month. And you'll say to them, what happens to that report? Does the boss actually read it? And they'll say no. You know, they write it on their computer and they print it onto paper, which is another topic. We'll get to that in a minute. But they'll print it onto paper and then they hand it in to the boss, and they know the boss doesn't read them, and they know that it just ends up in a filing cabinet. You know, and classically, the other thing they get told is that the report has to be long. You know, there was a classic story, a young girl that we know worked in a supermarket here, and her till didn't balance. You know, her cash register was a couple of dollars, you know, a few hundred yen out, wrong. In actual fact, it was actually, she had a few hundred yen more in her cash register than she should have. And when that happens in that supermarket, they have to write a report. And she wrote a report and said, look, I don't really know what happened. It's possible that I didn't give somebody enough change or something like that. And gave it to the boss, and he gave it straight back to her and said it needs to be longer. And this is really common. Lots of people we talk to tell us stories like this, where they hand in a report to the boss with all the essential information in it, but get it handed back to them and told to go write it longer. And this is the sort of thing, this is the problem, and this is where, you know, at the moment it's not smart biz. You know, people are wasting days of their time writing reports that nobody will read. You know, whole departments of people in companies spend hours of their time sitting in a meeting listening to some old guy talking that is not actually giving them any information at all that's going to help them be more productive. So basically, you know, 2 hours of their time, there's 20 people wasting 2 hours of their time, which is, you know, 40 potentially productive hours just wasted. And what's really required is that the government's going to have to do some really huge promotional campaigning to get across to companies and to individuals that this sort of thing's a total waste of time, and they're just not going to be able to do it. Because what's going to happen, there's going to be 2 problems. One, the internal problem in Japan is going to be we're just not going to get everything done. If people are spending, you know, 60 hours a week at work or 50 hours a week at work, but only 20 hours a week being productive, and all these other people start retiring, we're not going to get everything done. You know, and not only is there's a lot of this stuff wasting the time of the staff member, but we're also wasting the time of the customers. And those of you who've watched our videos have heard lots of examples of this, where, you know, we'll sit for half an hour and listen to some bureaucrat tell us why we can't do something, instead of finding a solution to how to get it done. You know, and there's a lot of time wasted here like that, with people having big, long explanations for really pointless stuff that you don't need a big, long explanation for. You know, and the government needs to get this across to the companies and to the public that you know, that is the traditional way, that is the old style way of doing business in Japan, and some aspects of that obviously would be nice to keep, but by and large, you know, if something takes 10 minutes to do in another country, it shouldn't take 5 or 6 hours to do the same thing here. You know, and if something takes 5 or 10 minutes to do in another country and requires no paperwork at all because it's all done on a computer, then we shouldn't take 5 or 6 hours and a big wad of paper to get it done here. You know, there's so many ridiculous systems here where we're filling out reams and reams of paper for something that's already on the computer, and that paperwork you end up taking home with you because nobody actually needs it. You know, hospitals, those of you who have seen that hospitals videos we've made, we've talked about that. The hospitals, you know, you go from one place to another in a hospital, end up with a big heap of paper, and then just take it home because the doctors don't refer to it because it's all on the computer. So then we mentioned briefly then about the other countries. I mean, classically what happens here is that you'll see stories on TV here about some clever thing from another country about the way things are done in another country, and everybody goes, isn't that great, isn't that great, isn't that great? But just keep doing it the way it's done here. And the other thing is that there's a lot of things here that everybody knows are a waste of time, but they all just say, oh, well, that's just the way it's done. That's just the way we do it. That's just the way it's done, and everybody just accepts it, which is, again, well, it's got to come down from the top. And then on that topic too, the other thing that obviously needs to happen is it's pretty well accepted in most other countries that you've got to listen to the people that are doing the work. You know, Toyota do actually know that. Toyota have a anonymous suggestion system so that their staff can make suggestions about the way things are done anonymously, because in Japanese culture, people don't want to jump over their boss's head, and people don't want to seem as if they're smarter than the boss, which is the way it's seen here. If someone who's actually doing the job says, hey boss, instead of me doing this here, I can walk over there and do it twice as fast because the parts are over there. And in Japanese culture, if you do that, that's sort of suggesting that you're smarter than your boss, which would upset your boss and would make everybody else uncomfortable. Whereas in other countries, in a lot of other countries, it's quite well accepted that obviously the person doing the job can come up with really good solutions that can save a lot of time. And that's another thing that they've got to get across too, is that sort of thing isn't undermining the boss. That sort of thing is just being more productive and more smart biz. And you can see why, those of you who understand the way Japanese culture works, that labeling it something like smart biz is the solution. Because then they go, oh, it's okay then. It's smart biz that junior staff members be able to make positive suggestions to their superiors. That is smart biz. Oh, well, it's okay then, you know. And of course it would be. It would increase productivity if the people who are actually doing the work could make positive suggestions to their bosses about what they're doing, about the way they're doing their job, how they can improve what they are doing themselves. So, and then of course you've got the interaction with the rest of the world thing. You know, this whole thing recently they've been talking, particularly with the 2020 Olympics, they've been talking about improving the English level here, and they've got no idea. You know, we've got local companies here now who've gone, right, we need to improve the English level of our staff so they can interact with our clients around the world. And so these 30-year-old, 40-year-old people who can't speak English at all are being given 1 hour English lessons a week so that they can get themselves up to an international business standard, which obviously is never going to happen. And again, I mean, they need to really go and look at Europe and see how people live in Europe, where, you know, there's people in Europe who can speak 2, 3, 4, 5 languages. You know, we get comments under our videos all the time from people saying, in Denmark, we often find this. You know, in Germany, it's quite unusual for us to, you know, beautiful English. And so, you know, obviously Japan needs to look at that. Why is it that the people in Europe can have 3, 4, 5 languages going on and here they don't? And I mean, we know why they don't. It's because English is treated And other languages, not just English, but English and Spanish and French and other languages are treated here like a hobby and a bit of an amusement and a bit of decoration on a poster, rather than being treated as a important communication tool. So, and that leads to the cultural thing and everything else about how to interact with the rest of the world. It's actually, as a foreign living in Japan, it's actually easier to do business with businesses in China. If you want to buy like promotional materials, or if you want to buy, all sorts of things, it's often easier to send emails to companies in China and buy things from them and have them sent to Japan. Because, quite often we send emails to Japanese companies every week, and quite often we don't get answers. You just don't get an answer. And even the ones, they'll have one page on their website. They'll have an 80-page website, and they'll have one page in English, and you think, oh, maybe these guys are English friendly. Send them an English email and just don't get an answer. And that's really common, really, really common. And then contact a company in China about the same thing and get an email straight away saying, yeah, happy to help you. And I mean, on a larger scale, what's that doing to the Japanese economy? There must be people all around the world experiencing the same thing and just not being able to do business with Japan at all because, the companies aren't answering their emails and the people in the companies can't communicate in English. And again, we're not saying any of this, that we think any of this should happen. All we're responding to is the Japanese government and the Japanese media talking about this topic, saying, we need to improve these things. And they're saying this, they've been saying this for years, and there's nothing happening. They're not actually doing anything. So until they find out with a catchy little name to call it, we propose smart biz, but anything will do. Just give it a name and then start promoting it and get it across to because it's the only way you can make anything change in Japan is to make it mainstream. You've got to introduce it and make it mainstream, because no one wants to be different. No company in Japan, wants to start saving their customers time. Those of you who've seen our stories recently about the banks, the amount of time that we waste, banks and real estate companies and everybody else, just wasting hours and hours and hours of our time and their time, and there's no company in Japan that wants to be the first to say, we're gonna give fast service to our customers and save our customers time, because that concept's not really strong here. But if they start smart biz or something similar to that, and the Japanese company can say, yeah, we're modern and up with the times, we have smart biz systems in place. Come to our company because we understand smart biz, and we'll save lots of your time. Then you might be able to get companies to do it. And then once the snowball started rolling, then you'd find that it just ripped through the country. That's one amazing thing about Japan. When they get a concept across, an example of this was after the Fukushima disaster, the government promoted the idea of saving electricity. They said, we need you to save electricity. Support Fukushima, support the people of Fukushima by saving electricity. And immediately, you'd go to convenience stores, half the lights would be turned off. You go into businesses and the air conditioner would be turned off. It was summer at the time, or it was warm weather at the time, and you go into a business and it would be 30 degrees because they'd turned the air conditioner off to support the people of Fukushima. And quite often without thinking about it, because Western Japan is actually on a different electricity grid to Eastern Japan, so turning our power off didn't actually help Fukushima at all. But because the government had promoted the idea of supporting Fukushima by turning your power down, using less power, everyone did it. And that's why this sort of idea can work. If they give it a name like Smart Biz or something similar to that and promote Smart Biz, it's Smart Biz to do this. It's Smart Biz to save your customers time. It's Smart Biz to not use as much wasted filling out pieces of paper when you don't need to. It's Smart Biz to teach English to people or other languages to people so they can communicate with the rest of the world. It's smart Biz to change and innovate. I mean, that's the way it's seen here is that anybody here suggests any sort of improvement to the way things should be done, and other people really react badly to it because it's seen that the person who's suggesting the change thinks they're smarter than everybody else. The whole country does it this way and you're suggesting a different way. That means that you think you're smarter than everybody else. Whereas they need to get across that it's Smart Biz that new ideas can lead to all sorts of productivity, and that if someone comes up with an idea, that instead of just rejecting it because it's something, you know, any Japanese company ever says to you, we haven't done that before, at the moment, if they say we haven't done that before, the meaning is we will never do it. And that's the way most companies work here, is that if they've never done it before, they'll never do it. And they wonder why things don't improve. Because if they've never done it, they'll never do it. Whereas in a lot of other countries, if you suggest a good idea, the boss will go, geez, that's a good idea, I haven't heard that before, let's give that a try. Right? And that's how improvements happen, isn't it? So we would propose that if Japan wants to stabilise its own internal economy and its own internal quality of life, that smart biz is going to be essential. And that if Japan's going to compete with the rest of the world, you know, and do business with the rest of the world, that smart biz is going to be the go, because other people from around other parts of the world don't want to sit around in a meeting listening to five guys bowing and apologising and saying, well, they can't do anything. You know, and you get that here all the time. People spend 30 minutes apologising to you, telling why they can't do something, why something's not possible. Happens all the time. You know, we had the solar power guy recently spend an hour telling us why they couldn't put solar power on the roof of our house because it's an old house with mud under the tiles. An hour, you know, an hour, instead of trying to find a way of getting things done, spending an hour telling us why he couldn't do it. That was the whole conversation. There was no solution. He had no solution. But in current Japanese society, that you can't just say, sorry, it can't be done. You have to spend an hour of your time explaining why it can't be done with great, long-winded explanations to show that you care. So that's not smart biz, is it? So anyway, we love Japan, and we really want to see Japan survive and compete with the rest of the world. So we hope that at some stage in the next 10 or 20 years, they come up with something similar to this, because it's going to be necessary. Because from where we're sitting, if they don't do something from the top down and get this happening, then Japan's going to get left behind, and things here are going to get a lot tougher, unfortunately. So anyway, there it was, smart biz in Japan, the only way to go. Get some smart biz. More videos coming soon.